Hey, Huckster here. The traditional interpretation of do not resist evil has been non-resistance to evil. An odd conclusion given the fact that on every occasion Jesus himself resisted evil with every fiber of his being. The Greek word translated resist in Matthew 5:39 is an antistenai, meaning literally to stand against. It describes the way opposing armies would march towards each other until their ranks met. Then they would take a stand. That is, they would fight. Ephesians 6:13 uses precisely this imagery. Therefore, take up the whole armor of God so that you may be able to withstand. That's that same word, antistenai, on that evil day. And having done everything to stand firm, stenai. Jesus is not telling us to submit to evil, but to refuse to oppose it on its own terms. 1 Timothy 5:8, but if anyone does not provide for his relatives, and especially for members of his household, he has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. Romans 13:4, for he is God's servant for your good, but if you do wrong, be afraid. For he does not bear the sword in vain, for he is the servant of God, an avenger who carries out God's wrath on the wrongdoer. In Exodus 22:1, if a man steals an ox or a sheep and kills it or sells it, he shall repay 5 oxen for an ox, and 4 sheep for a sheep. If a thief is found breaking in and is struck so that he dies, there shall be no blood guilt for him. But if the sun has risen on him, there shall be blood guilt for him. He shall surely pay. What that's telling us is, if someone comes in the night and you struggle with him and you kill him because you don't know if he's going to kill you or not, but then if the sun comes up and you see that you can clearly deal with it in a way that doesn't take his life, and you kill him anyway, then you're guilty. There shall be blood guilt. In Acts 23, there's a plot to kill Paul by 40 assassins. And he's moved in the night to another city. And as protection, he receives an army escort of 200 soldiers, 200 spearmen, and 70 horsemen. And Paul does not reject this at all. And no comment to why this would be incorrect on Paul's behalf is given by Luke. Paul directly teaches that God ordains the just use of force by the government for the punishment of evil in Romans 13:4 that I mentioned above. Again, this is in accord with the Jewish concept of the use of force and indicates the Christian scriptures do not alter it. Christ followed those Jewish concepts, as did the apostles. In the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus' teaching about turning the other cheek was in response to a clear case of petty annoyances, insults. Nothing in these verses mandate a refusal to protect yourself or your loved ones when life itself is being threatened. Solomon wrote, to everything there is a season, a time for every purpose under heaven, a time to be born, a time to die, a time to plant, and a time to pluck that what is planted, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to break down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to cast away stones and a time to gather stones, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to gain and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to throw away, a time to tear and a time to sow, a time to keep silence and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time of war and a time of peace. If we sit back and watch something or someone steal something and we don't speak up, or we know of a crime we could prevent and we don't, we're complicit to the crime. To watch an act of cruelty to children without trying to intervene is morally inexcusable. To permit a murder to take place, and we could have done something to prevent it, even if we had to use force, is ethically wrong. If we fail to use force to protect anybody who is confronted with evil, we are in fact failing to show love toward that person. It would instead be sin to sit by and idly watch another harm, physical harm, being perpetrated on somebody when it can be avoided or prevented by our use of force. Not resisting evil is a sin of omission, and a sin of omission can bring the same result as one committing the evil himself. Any man who refuses to protect his wife or his children or his neighbor or his fellow countrymen against violence fails in his moral obligation. In Genesis 14, Abram rescued Lot by a battle when he was forcibly taken. Israel battled against her enemies in Deuteronomy 20 and 29, Joshua 11, the Battle of Jericho, Joshua 12, in Numbers 35:17, it explains by having the intention to kill. Murderers were to be put to death. In Deuteronomy 16:18 and 19, they were commanded to cast out all their enemies. Killing is different than murder. Murder is senseless and for selfish reasons, while killing is to protect and preserve life. I think we have to look at 2 Timothy 3:16. All Scripture is God-breathed and is useful for teaching, rebuking, correcting, and training in righteousness. If the Old Testament tells us something, we are not to say that is the old law, because that is the very law that Jesus followed. His apostles followed those laws. They did not have the New Testament at that time. And to take a verse like Matthew 5:39 and say that it means we should stand by, not resisting evil, and allow the innocent to become victims of violent intruders, I think we fail in our moral obligation. God Himself sets up servants. These are servants of God to correct us if we do wrong. If we take away what God sets up? Are we not falling into sin ourselves by failing to meet those moral obligations set forth by God, who is the same yesterday, today, and forever? Peace, love, justice, understanding,